City Council meeting to order for Monday, November 2nd. Roll call, please.
Eversol, Cogni, Nemitz, Wrestler, Kook, Ocamp, Martin, and Riddle.
If everybody please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. We do have a proclamation, and this is actually kind of timely with everything going on. It is a small business proclamation. Small Business Saturday was November 2nd, but as far as I'm concerned, November 28th is Small Business Saturday. Small businesses are a vital part of Columbia's economy, generates hundreds of jobs, and improving the quality of life for the residents that live in Columbia. We support our local business and recognize the critical roles they play in maintaining a strong local economy. Small Business Saturday is a nationwide campaign to cultivate businesses for small merchants on the Saturday after Thanksgiving. Small Business Saturday will help stimulate economic growth locally by following in tradition of Black Friday and Cyber Monday, two of the busiest shopping days of the year. The City of Columbia joins with our community partners, Historic Main Street Columbia Association and Columbia Chamber of Commerce, in urging all residents of Columbia and the surrounding area to do a portion of all of your holiday shopping at small Columbia locally owned businesses. Now, therefore, I, Kevin Hutchinson, Mayor of Columbia, do hereby proclaim November 28th, 2020 in Columbia, Illinois as Small Business Saturday. Remember, it's the Saturday after Thanksgiving. Andrew, you have anything to add? Or?
No, just thank you again for doing this and recognizing it and encouraging the community to come out and shop and eat and drink and support local businesses, especially this year. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Anybody have any questions, comments? All righty. Are there any other recognitions, presentations, proclamations, public input? Anybody raising their hand, asking to speak, wants to speak about anything? No? All righty. I have no announcements. Alderman, any announcements, comments? Department heads, directors. I know you have one.
Yes, sir. Recently, the city was the subject of an investigation by the Office of the Attorney General regarding a request for review pertaining to an alleged violation of the Open Meetings Act. This surrounded the zoning amendments that were passed a few months back. The individual initiating the request had alleged that the process by which we followed, where City Council was asked for any kind of a input on it, was improper. I did respond to the Office of the Attorney General, letting them know that all of the discussions were held in an open manner, first with the Plan Commission at a duly noticed meeting, and then subsequently approved by the City Council at a duly noticed meeting as well. I did explain that, as part of regular course of business, staff, we do have conversations on an individual basis with the aldermen, and the Office of the Attorney General agreed that the city did act appropriately and that no violation of the Open Meetings Act occurred. I do want to just kind of use this as a reminder. Typically, whenever I send an email out, I know Scott similarly and other staff members, we always put that header, please do not reply all. This is one of the reasons why that is of the utmost importance that you do not hit reply all, because that would constitute a discussion amongst the aldermen, which cannot take place if there's a quorum that's included on the chain. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on that. I certainly have the documentation if anybody wants to specifically review the facts and circumstances surrounding that particular case. Next, we have received, I believe, approximately 4 proposals for the renewal of our general liability, property casualty, and work comp coverage. Jackie has put in a tremendous amount of work into that process. We have one more that we anticipate receiving Thursday morning. Once we have that on Thursday, on Friday, I will probably send the recommendation out to the council. That way you can take a look at it. That'll give you a week to let me know if you have any specific questions, comments, or concerns that you would like addressed. But just due to the timely nature of the renewal starting December 1, we will need to act on that at the November 16th meeting. That's all that I have.
Anything else? Any other department heads?
Yeah, I do. Mayor. If I may.
Oh, yes, you may.
All right, I got an update, some stuff to discuss real quick on Creekside Park, and don't shoot the messenger, please. If you've been following our engineering report, we just got the final permit from DNR for the work in the floodway, and we were working to get this on the street to get it bid, finishing the final plans and specs. Well, at the same time, we just received a letter from DNR. We just received a letter from the Department of Natural Resources from the grant side of it, stating that they've had many requests or inquiries that would the grant period be extended. You know, they have a certain window of time to get everything completed. And one would think, and they realize that the COVID pandemic has caused a variety of things, some financial instability with communities. I know that from the process to get to the bid, you're dealing with all these regulatory agencies and consultants that are all working remotely. So things haven't been as efficient. And then, you know, some of these things, like for us, have a lead time. The supply chain has kind of been affected by COVID as well. So we've been looking, and how this affects our project is, you know, we have some lead time for the bridge, for the pavilions, for the playgrounds, and we've contacted the suppliers to kind of see what that lead time is and making sure we can fit, okay, within the time constraints that we have. So far, everything looks like it can fit. Not a lot of wiggle room though. And there's a lot of unknowns out there with COVID and how it could change a supply chain during the process and so on. So one thing within the letter, they've given us 3 options. One, you can continue as full steam ahead and hopefully you make everything in time. 2, you can pull back. Some communities may decide to pull back and relinquish the money that they got advanced. You know, they gave us like $200,000 up front. Or the third thing is you can modify your scope, okay? And so the one thing that I want to try to avoid is if we go all in, and when we do that, we have to comply with everything we said we're going to do, okay? And then what happens if there's a chance that something happens and we don't meet the grant requirement of the timing of it? Well, then we got to pay back $200,000 and not get reimbursed $200,000. And where does that money come from? You know, we don't have that much money in the park improvement fund. It would have to come out of a different departmental fund or something. So my thought was that maybe we need to take a step back and reach out to DNR and see if we can revise the scope. Maybe do a phase right now. For instance, extending the trail from Rick Road to the Jim&O Trail. I think it would get a lot of use. The amount of that cost, we have enough bond money to make it work even if they tell us no. So with that said, I just want to kind of get your guys' ideas of what you think we may want to do. If you have any questions or additional thoughts. I know I've spoken to Mariana about this already. I just think that we may not want to over leverage ourselves with all these unknowns that are out there. There's a lot of moving parts and it all has to play perfectly for us to pull this whole thing off. I mean, I think it may be in our best interest right now to take a step back. Let's do a phase. We still have bond money left over and we can implement another phase in subsequent budgets or what have you. So.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Alderman
What
Ressler?
constitutes being the completion being enough to satisfy their deadline?
Construction complete.
That's what I mean, as far as what minute things could be. I mean, that's what I was curious about. I mean, getting the things in, it's like, what could conceivably drag out to the point where it would disqualify you? Because
Like I said, the bridge will have lead time, pavilions have lead time. And for example, I can use the streetscape as an example. When we went to bid out the streetscape, we reached out to the supplier of the lights We wanted to see what the lead time was because we adjusted our staging and the project to try to minimize the impact on Main Street. We didn't want everything to be dark forever. So I told us 16 weeks. So we worked up the plans and specs, put this thing out to bid, got the bids back, got the bonds, insurance contracts, got the shop drawings, and that was about a 6 to 8 week difference. And so when the subcontractor submitted the shop drawings, they notified Tim and I that now it's 26 weeks. We lost 10 weeks. You know, same thing with the SCADA on the Wecker station. That was promised a certain deadline and it's moved, and they tell us because of COVID. You know, so we've done the research, but we have maybe 3 to 4 weeks to play with. That's about it.
And so you're saying that if you went in all in on this, that if you got to the point where there was a unforeseen delay that actually put you over the top,
You're stuck.
they have no forgiveness or extension in that they want all the money back.
They want all the money back, including interest.
Alderman Nemitz.
While I was disappointed, of course, when he brought this up to me, then I realized though that the catalyst for this was the letter that he got from DNR saying, I mean, in spite of all the restrictions, in spite of everything that's been going on, and Illinois has been pretty harsh with that, there would be no grace allowed. I mean, they were gonna stick with everything, and I thought, well, I mean,
we have a project that's good. It's approved. All the regulatory agencies like it. We know it'll fit. It's a unique piece of property. We just may have to implement it in pieces. Maybe that's the responsible thing to do because I don't know if the end justifies the means. Because if we get over our skis, then we got to come up with, and then the park improvement funds depleted. That's what's paying for our bond. And we're not gonna be able to do any maintenance on anything else, you know, for a period of time without taking it from some other different source. And so I think all these things that we cannot control, you know, the only thing that we can control is the scope right now. I mean, all these other factors we can't. I mean, with the positivity rate statewide over 8%, who knows if they're going to roll us back into some other situations. You know, the video gaming I know was shut down for 3.5 months. With the state getting a cut, maybe they'll hang on to it and not restrict that, but you just never know after tomorrow and after if positivity rates continue to go up. And that's our funding source for this stuff too. So, I mean, there's just a lot of different things here that seem to be pulling in the wrong direction. And
Chris, go ahead, Alderman Nemitz.
just to say what he was talking about, though, I still thought was encouraging to connect Rick to the railroad right away, get the bridge in and everything. People can make the loop, people can utilize, they can visualize, and then we can move forward when we're able to financially to the next stage without losing the grant or giving it back.
well, and the two things there with revising the scope, obviously it's a smaller project and there's less moving parts to make work. Okay. That trail project, which is probably 1/2 mile long, the bridge, and it would be some entrance work, a culvert, similar to what we had planned. There's no guarantee that IDNR says they're cool with it. They may not score, right? Or they may say, yeah, it's great, let's run with it. And there's always a chance that we start running with it and let's say the bridge doesn't come in. You know, we have to then relinquish whatever half of the project was back to DNR, but we can still pay for it all within the bond. Otherwise, the alternative is we go all in unknown and there could be a $400,000 hit.
No, I think.
If we go in as a hybrid, we might still be able to recapture 150 or 200 from them, but there's still a little bit of unknown, but we at least have the money bonded to cover that
It's a more
complete
doable
project.
unknown.
Less moving parts,
Yeah.
but versus we're not tapping into some other fund to try to, if we don't make it in time.
So
And
does
so-
everybody agree that the way to go is to phase this in and just be on top of it better than the unknown that could catch us?
And then, you know, and going forward, you know, we're still gonna have money in the bond and we have to implement it in the next couple of years anyhow. So we might be able to leverage those funds with something else to continue phase 2 and 3 and just have to do it that way. I think there's just too many unknowns right
Alright.
now.
So you'll let us know what IDNR says?
I sure will.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect.
All right, thanks, sir.
Thank you, Chris, for the update. Any other department heads, directors, reports? Consent agenda, Mr. Hefkin.
3 items on the consent agenda. The first one is motion to approve minutes of the October 19th, 2020 regular city council meeting. Motion to approve a special event permit for the city visit with Santa event scheduled to be held December 5th, 2020 and December 12th, 2020. And then motion to approve payment of vouchers for the period of October 15th, 2020 through October 29th, 2020 in a total amount of $226,501.80.
All right. Does anybody have any questions, comments on the consent agenda? Entertain a motion to approve is presented by Hook, second by Riddle. Roll call.
Eversol.
Yes.
Agni.
Yes.
Nemitz.
Yes.
Wrestler.
Yes.
Hook.
Yes.
Ocamp. Martins,
Yes.
and Riddle.
Yes.
Oh, the line's working tonight.
Alderman Nemeth?
Mayor, just one add on that with regard to the Santa event. I'm excited that they're having it, that they're gonna find a way to make it work. The one thing I wanted to mention, it's very minor, but that is actually the historic dance pavilion, and that's the way it's referred to in Meadow Park, and that's the way it was partnered with Turner Hall and everything. So it is a bandstand, of course, too, but when Erder Foundation donated to the stage and seating area and the promenade, it was all
The historic
connected
dance
to the
pavilion.
historic dance pavilion, yes.
All righty, thank you.
Just trying to keep the history there.
No, that's great. That's great. All right, next we have ordinance number 3539 to set compensation to be paid to the City of Columbia, Illinois municipal officers who are elected at the next regular municipal election held April 2021. Does anybody have any further questions, comments on that? If not, entertain a motion to approve as presented. Motion by Martin, second by Wrestler. Any other questions? Roll call.
Eversol.
Yes.
Agni.
Yes.
Nemitz.
Yes,
Wrestler.
Yes.
Hook.
Yes.
Ocamp.
Yes.
Martins.
Yes.
And Riddle.
Yes.
All right, next is resolution number 202024 for improvement under the Illinois Highway Code for Quarry Road. We need any other discussion on that? I think everybody's up on it. Or
I'll make that one.
motion by Alderman Eversaw, second by Alderman Hook. Any other questions, comments? Roll call.
Eversol.
Yes.
Agni.
Yes.
Nemitz.
yes,
Wrestler.
Yes.
Hook.
Yes.
Ocamp.
Yes.
Martins
Yes.
and Riddle.
Yes.
All right, next is still for discussion only. There will not be action on this, but this is the discussion of the draft regulations for domestic chickens within the city limits.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. As you recall, back on the September 21st, this subject was brought up in discussion at the council meeting, and staff was directed to take a look at it, research it, talk with the Plan Commission, and report back. So that is why I am here. I've included in your packet some background information based on the research that I had done, along with a working draft of the regulations for your consideration. This evening, I'd just like to give you this bit of background, let you know the way other communities are doing it, show you, walk through the way that I proposed, and just get any feedback you might have. And then, just get a consensus on whether we're moving forward, we're shutting it down, or what. So I'll start really quick. I found in my research, actually, there are a number of communities in the St. Louis metro area that actually do allow for domestic chickens in residential zoning districts. The list is is in the packet in front of you. Of note are some communities that are considered some pretty wealthy, communities, Ladue, Frontenac, Kirkwood, Brentwood. All of these allow in some form or fashion chickens to be raised on in residential zoning districts. So there are two primary ways to do it. The most common is through zoning-based regulations. There are about 4 or 5 communities in the metro area, though, that do have a permit-based regulation. So, and just to give you an idea of what I did, I had some conversations with some folks that I know that are in similar positions as I do in communities that allow chickens. And I made one call to a community that actually has the permit-based ones. And I just wanted to share some of the feedback that I've got. First off, colleagues of mine who are in similar positions who have the zoning-based approach, none of them have reported any problems whatsoever, either on an enforcement side or nobody complains about them. The only time they complain about it is to call and say, hey, my neighbor has chickens. Is that okay? They've never had to go crack down on anybody or anything yet. And I had a conversation with who was that we talked to, Doug? That was the community development.
Collinsville.
Yeah, in Collinsville. They have a permit-based system that they passed the ordinance on in 2016. Interestingly, they put in there a maximum cap of 75 permits to be issued for the town, for the whole city. They have only issued 10. So point being is, folks, to be honest with you, I don't see that this is going to be an issue if you feel so inclined to pass it. In terms of the burden on city staff, in terms of what it is that the community has to deal with. I'm just not seeing it from anybody that I'm having conversations with in any of the research that I've done. That in mind, though, I did make an attempt at drafting regulations that allowed us to put this allowance into the zoning code, but that still gave us plenty of opportunities, the way it is written, in order to crack down on any issues if we see them arise, and do it quickly, both as nuisances and as zoning violations. So we've got the opportunity to do both, so that anything that would happen. I'll get to the guts of it. You don't care about where we put it in the code. So I'll just say the idea here would be that actually no changes to property zoned A1. It's agricultural. We don't have any restrictions on chickens, either as a production agriculture or as just backyard chicken keeping. So we're not proposing any changes to A1 zoning. Otherwise, though, we are saying they can only be kept on lots with single-family residential primary uses that are owner occupied. Okay, no apartments, anything like that, and renters either. Owner occupied only. And then also, we're saying shall not be. Basically, we're just also eliminating any other uses or zoning districts being allowed. So the main way that in terms of the space allocation, most communities are allowing anywhere between either 4 and 12, depending on the lot size. So basically what I did was take a look at what those general lot sizes were and compare that to our zoning district and do it on a zoning basis. So that way it was a little easier. It's a little easier to implement and administer if you can just look at the map and see what they're allowed and move on from there. So with this, A1, I already told you, it's just regulated per the A1 zoning regulations. R1 and R2 districts, you'd be allowed up to 8 chickens. R3 or R4 up to 6, and R5, 6, 7, and C2 up to 4 chickens. Restrictions and limitations. The primary one to keep in mind is that we don't want roosters crowing or crowing hens. So that's a big prohibition right off the bat. You get one and it starts crowing, you better get rid of it right away. We're going to know about it. That's one of them that you hear about once in a while, evidently. We're saying it's for domestic purposes and not commercial purposes. This is for the enjoyment of your family, whether as pets or as a food source. This is not for you to sell to other people. We don't want commercial businesses in the middle of our residential neighborhoods. They should not, and basically the rest of this is up here is really just saying, hey, backyards only. That's where you're allowed. We did put some size, and by the way, these size limitations that I put in here were universal with all the codes and even the permit-based ones that I found. These are the same requirements that everybody uses as far as the dimensions that I'm using. Which we're saying that the pens shall not exceed 6 feet in height. You can keep them within a fenced yard or within a pen. And if you have a pen, the pen has to have a cover on it. Not a solid cover, but some sort of netting or chicken wire or something like that. And we're saying for the health of the chicken, provide at least 10 square feet of area in the open area. For the coops, no more than 1 coop per lot is the thing. And then on the size area, requirement would be 4 square feet per chicken, not to exceed 80 square feet total. and not to exceed 8 feet in height. So we're talking about make it something that's not too auspicious, that's pretty minimal, that would be no more visually obstructive than say a storage shed or something like that. Keep it simple. And we do have some requirements for building materials as well, so that they remain high quality. The setbacks and the locational restrictions, this is something that we put these dimensions were not universal, and I did look specifically at our zoning regulations to see what would work versus what are the dimensions that other people use. The one that was pretty universal is keeping them 15 feet from the property lines. That way you're close to the center of your property, depending on how wide your yard is and what the zoning district is, of course. Which for the C2 and R6 zoning districts, which are our core area zoning districts, those minimum requirements aren't big enough necessarily to require that, because the side yard setback requirement's only 10 feet instead of, or I'm sorry, I think it's 6 feet actually, instead of 15 feet. So we had to kind of knock that down to 10 feet, but we are maintaining that you cannot have it within 25 feet of another residential structure. So that way there's a little more space from not just the property line, but from your neighbor's home. You're setting it back a little bit further there, which that was one that wasn't universal, but that was a spacing requirement in a number of the other codes that I looked at. And of course, we're trying to keep them out of any easements or 100-year floodplain so that there's no issues with, well, for one, runoff of manure. And we call that a nuisance as well. That's something that could be handled under either the nuisance or the zoning infraction. And of course, the other issue is blocking up the floodplain with that one. Sometimes fences even can block the floodplain and cause some backage. And that's something that we just want to avoid. We want to make sure that our drainage infrastructure and that our drainage easements and everything, including the natural floodplains, are working as intended and whether as nature intended it or as designed. And of course, the final thing we're looking at would be those more kind of health, safety, welfare of both humans in the vicinity as well as the chickens themselves, in making sure that no material, waste, or excrement is allowed to run off into adjacent properties, that manure must be removed or tilled into the soil regularly, that odor shall not be allowed to be detected off premises. If we can smell it from outside your yard, you're getting a nuisance violation. Sorry. That's what we're going to have to, if that's what it takes to get it through, and people are just going to have to keep their coops clean. And basically, make sure you're keeping your water fresh and changed. We don't want mosquitoes. We want to make sure everybody's all, that the chickens are happy and healthy, and anything that basically can be considered a poor or unsafe or an unhealthy condition, we have the option to either go after as a zoning violation or as a nuisance violation, or both. So that's it in a nutshell. I'd be happy to entertain any questions, comments, etc.
Alderman Agnew?
I don't know that much about chickens surviving in the winter, but if these chickens become pets or something to children, they're going to maybe want to bring it when it's 20 degrees or something. Does anyone know? Just put a light on it.
Chickens shall not be kept in any part of the residential structure or garage. So as long as they can warm them in the coop, they can keep them
Okay,
outside.
very good.
Usually grease at 360.
All right. Alderman Martins?
You said it's a 10-foot setback?
In the R6 and C2 zoning districts, it would be 10 foot. Every other zoning district, it'd be 15.
Okay, it'd be 15.
Correct.
So it has to be behind the structure of the house at least.
It could only be in the rear yard to start with, but yeah, it would be inside. It would be inside the rear yard area, basically, so you wouldn't be encroaching into the setback area that would be considered. Yeah, so you couldn't see it from in front of the house. It would be behind the house generally.
And it still has to be 25 feet away from any other
Residential
off-premise
structure. Correct.
Alderman Wessler,
You had in your zoning thing where you had the number of chickens.
your mic's not on.
No, well, nothing.
You had R7 and C2 in there.
Yeah.
If it's supposed to be single family.
Both of them
lots.
allow homes.
Huh?
Both R7 and C2 allow for residential,
Okay.
single
And,
family residential.
The other thing I saw in here was under section C where you talked about a restrictive covenant. So if a neighborhood had an HOA with a restrictive covenant that your neighborhood can't have chickens, and that would override this, and they would have to enforce it themselves.
That's correct.
Okay. And then,
But we'll probably, what, if implemented, we would probably ask them to also, like, if we get called out and have a look at, we'd ask them for proof that their HOA approved it, if they're within an HOA, just to make sure that we're not, that we could potentially, just so we know what's going on,
sure.
more than anything else.
And on the original, when this came up, and I wasn't at that meeting when they proposed this, I think it was 6 months ago when this first, I think, came up. But anyway, I wasn't at the meeting. I was curious, when they proposed, when people there were some people who wrote letters and emails, I think, that were proposing to do this. Well, I don't remember the overriding consensus was they want the chickens to be pets, to be eaten, to be eggs. Is it just a combination?
Most people I've spoken to, they're pets and they
They're pet.
collect the eggs. They don't slaughter their chickens regularly. I mean,
Yeah.
anything
So,
like that.
so that got me thinking about chickens. I mean, I don't know when this occurred, Nat, but there used to be, when I was a kid, lots of people had had pigeon coops. Are you allowed to have pigeons in town anymore?
Not that I'm aware of.
I'm just curious because back in the 70s, a lot of us had pigeons and pigeon coops and that. We had 20, 30 of them in there. And I was just curious, when they went out, are they not included in anything, or was everybody just in violation of everything back then?
They're not included in this. All I was asked to look at was chicken.
Right, I'm just curious of that because if,
I wouldn't even know the first thing about looking at pigeons.
well, I just didn't
It's
know if pigeons
not-
were classified, if they're a pet and you can have
Yeah.
them and there's nobody governing the thing. Because if you had 20 or 30 pigeons, you had a problem.
Anything other than a
Okay.
chicken would probably be, because as a nuisance, keeping any fowl
Yeah.
is considered a nuisance if it's
Yeah,
not
this is
approved by
only
zoning.
chickens.
So
Okay.
at this point, all this would do is cover chickens.
Okay.
So if you decide you want to cover pigeons, we will have to have another discussion.
Well, just the pigeons back then were much more of a nuisance to the neighbors than the chickens were. Because if you just had 4 chickens compared to 4 pigeons, it's like, that's really not that much. But anyway, most people had lots of pigeons. But the last thing was on the enforcement section where you talked about things that would be violations in that. And it was, you said that there would be a fine or some sort of a enforcement action. That I was curious if that's just it. If somebody gets a complaint, we end up going out there legitimizing the complaint and then going ahead and writing them a ticket, and then they're supposed to pay the ticket, and it ends going back and forth. Or is there an ultimate thing that, no, we take the chickens?
Okay,
Chicken.
so my approach to code enforcement, we're always going for abatement first, not punishment, okay? A punishment penalty, that's our last scenario,
So
all
fix
right?
the
That's the
problem.
last thing we go for. We're always trying to talk with people, so send them letters, ask them to abate the nuisance, ask them to do it in a way that is not punitive first. The only way we go on to the punitive measure is if they fail to comply with our request to come into compliance.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Alderman Martins.
Another question. You're saying that the HOA can make a stricter, for them, they can say no pigeons or no chickens, not the pig, no chickens in the neighborhood.
I'm saying this, what this basically says is that the zoning code does not override your restrictive covenants. If you can't have them by your HOA, don't look for us, at us to cover you.
I always thought that the city code is it, and if an HOA can't have anything more restrictive than the code.
No, HOA can have things that are a lot more restrictive than the code.
Okay.
What
Yes.
typically happens is the city will not enforce HOA covenants typically.
Okay.
This is going to be one of those rare occasions to where we will look at covenants and say, sorry. Alderman Agnew?
Oh, no, the hawks will take care of the pigeons.
Yeah.
Because I've been over to the Ace parking lot twice. Sorry.
Okay.
and they take care of them.
So I guess the only question is, one, are we still wanting to move forward with this? I mean, any other questions, comments? Alderman Hook?
You know, you said you hadn't had any issues or didn't know of any issues that have been brought up, but, you know, this issue that came before us, you know, from the neighborhood, you know, was one that I know all the neighbors and I grew up in. And the one instance where they had the chickens, that they brought them in the small, short period of time that they had them, every neighbor around there is opposed to it because of the way they dealt with the waste, with burning the straw, stinking up the neighborhood. One of the chickens getting out apparently at one time, I don't know that for fact. But the thing is, you know, we've got a minority request for something and we have a majority opposition to it. So do we move forward with that to accommodate that? Or, you know, it could be a one-off, but, you know, in that, and then what's the cost to the city for the enforcement piece of it? Because we will incur additional costs through if we do the permitting process, because you know, you'd almost have to make it a, you know, not like you had stated in there, you don't want to make it a right to own chickens. You want to at least do the permitting process so we can have greater control over that.
No, I don't. I don't. I mean, if we're going to do it as a permit basis, I'd rather not throw them out the window, to be honest with you. We don't need another bureaucratic control to,
Exactly.
I'm trying to streamline it. That's why I tried to make it as a zoning one so that we can either say, are you obeying the law or not? It's either a yes or no. That way we don't have to do all that upfront stuff and verifying everything, have another set of inspections to go check, have another permit to issue and remind everybody every year. That's the last thing I wanted. If we're going to do it, my preference would be as a zoning amendment as written, which is the way I've written it, as a zoning amendment, not doing a permit base. Now, that being said, I don't have a chicken in this fight. I don't care one way or another. I was doing what I was directed to do. I tried to do it as best as I could, but it's up to you at this point. Because to be honest with you, I don't think it'll be an enforcement issue on our side of things as far as resources, because it's not many people are going to have them. And based on, like I said, the conversation from my fellow colleagues in this profession, it's not an issue. They don't deal with it hardly ever. So I don't think it'd be any worse than anything else we do.
Anybody else have any comments? Well, I think before we move on to the next phase of actually having something to vote on, I think we do need to decide, is it going to be permit-based regulation or zoning-based regulation? And I think that's something that we need to establish before going to the next phase. So I guess just show of hands, I mean, whether you're for it or against it, who thinks it should be permit-based? Who thinks it should be zoning based?
I do. Alderman Holcamp.
Okay, let me try this again. Whether you're for it or against it, who thinks it should be permit based? Who thinks it should be zoning based? So we have four people that have an opinion and four that have no opinion. So I realize that, but like I said, whether it's for or against, he needs to have some direction to come back with an ordinance. I guess you can have an ordinance.
You'll save me work not having to write an ordinance if you don't want me to go.
If you don't have a majority wanting to pass this, then he doesn't have to do any more work.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I guess that's the next question. Before having Scott write all of this up, who's actually in favor of this? Show of hands.
Alderman Holcamp is in favor.
Holcamp in favor, Agni in favor. Who's opposed? Wow. Scott, you just saved yourself some work. We
Works
had,
for me.
Just unofficially 6-2. So
So I
Yes.
will not move forward or
Hang on.
waste any more
Alderman
time with
Westbrook.
that.
And my reasoning is that I find it a little ironic in that way back in the city's history, animals for everybody had. Well, my mom, they all had chickens, they had that. And somewhere along the lines, people went ahead and found it necessary to not have farm animals in town. And now we're actually moving back a little bit towards that thing, even though it's in a much smaller thing and that, but I just found it.
So now,
ironic that we're moving
here's
back
my
to
next
that.
question, though. In the past, this came up, it was discussed, there was a lot of discussion, et cetera. And then all of a sudden, it just kind of died on the vine and we never had an official action. I'm wondering, as far as Scott, Doug, would it make sense to go ahead and bring it forward so we can have an official no on an actual, I mean, does that make sense or no?
It's already in the code that,
It's not
Both
there.
those are permitted.
I just meant as an official action because this was for discussion only. There is no official action tonight. It was just discussion not to move forward with an official ordinance.
But your code already says it's not allowed, not permitted.
Perfect. I just wanted something a little more official on a no, but
Well,
that's
the
fine.
Minutes will contain the discussion and the fact that. the
Perfect.
straw vote said no. I understand.
All righty.
I
Nope,
understand that
we're-
it's on
it's-
the
Yeah.
discussion.
We're good to go. All righty. Thank you, Scott. Draft municipal code revision regarding video gaming. Doug or Scott, if you want to give us a little
All right.
overview on this.
So we discussed at the last meeting, October 19th, about the regulations. And so you direct us to take a look at some possible code revisions to bring it into line with the current way of thinking amongst the council members. So that's what we did. So what I have included in the packet are the existing and proposed language. So I'll start off the first section that we have here is where it deals with gambling. So the current code that deals with gambling, quite frankly, is the wrong place to regulate legal business activity, because what we said, it was in the gambling section where here's all our laws, here's the things that are illegal. And then we say, this one's illegal, except for this, and here's your licensing structure and stuff. So it's in the completely wrong place of the code. So what I'm really talking about doing is just keep the exception of the video gaming in the gambling section of the ordinance, and then move the rest into the business licensing section so that it's where it belongs. So this would create a new chapter 5.54 for video gaming establishments, the same way as we have like things for different sections for mobile home park regulations, for the liquor code, et cetera. And then, so what it would be is it is unlawful to operate video gaming terminals in the city of Columbia without a city issued business license, which is already required. This is not new. A city issued class A1 or class A2 liquor license. There's changes to that, so I'll walk through that. So this makes sense once I get there. And then full compliance with the Illinois Video Gaming Act. And then the rest is almost verbatim from what was struck from the 9. So that we're just basically establishing that video gaming is legal in the city if done legally according to having the proper permits and liquor license. And then the annual fee. So based on what the discussion was at the October 19th meeting and what Mr. Brim and I guess interpreted as being that there really was no desire amongst council to have that 50% income cap on video gaming to have a liquor license. Then this video gaming revenue definition is no longer needed because it's not used anywhere else in the liquor code, so that can be deleted. The section in the prohibited license that talks about any a retail license being issued to businesses that get more than 50% of their gross monthly revenues from video gaming. If we're removing that cap, that's no longer needed. So what we're doing is just basically forcing it and saying that, hey, nobody can have video gaming unless you've got a class A1 or class A2 license. It's basically just reestablishing the fact that it's an A1 or A2 license that's needed. Now on A1 and A2 license, So here's the thing, when I looked at the classes of license that all the video gaming establishments had, they either had an A1, an A2, or a B. All of ours did. A1, A2, or B. The main difference is that A1 and A2 take out the caps in there, the 50% or more being alcohol versus 50% or more being non-alcohol, leave that out. The main difference otherwise was the fact that you could only sell on premises or you could sell sealed containers to go. So the ones that had the B license could only sell on premises. The ones that had the A license could sell either on premises for consumption on premises or in a sealed container to go. So basically kind of like liquor store or, a 6-pack to go on your way out the door sort of thing. So we still had to maintain the ability to be able to have both options, but just tailor it to only those who had video gaming license. So what I've done is with A1, this simple enough, I'll just read it. So with the A1, the Class A1 license shall be reserved for the video gaming establishments licensed as such by the state of Illinois under the Illinois Video Gaming Act. Class A1 licenses shall authorize the retail sale of alcoholic liquor on premises specified for the consumption on premises. And I also added the one contingency that we had previously discussed in our discussion last year that Chief Paul is pretty adamant about, and that is that convenience stores that also dispense sell automotive fuels shall not be eligible for Class A1 licenses. So that keeps us out of the convenience stores. So that would be the ones that are only doing liquor on premises for consumption on premises. And then A2 is basically the same, except that this is the one that would be allocated to those who had the A1 and A2 license previously, that they could sell the sealed containers to go as well. So 2 classes, reserve them for the video gaming establishments, removes the artificial 50% cap that we had in there previously, and so forces them into either an A1 or A2, and it eliminates convenience stores from being able to have them in either situation. That's the recap.
All righty. Any questions, Alderman Nemitz?
Scott, the license, the criteria for the license is examined every year for the liquor license, Mayor. That's for you too. Is it criteria for the liquor license examined every year, or once it's issued, it stays until it's?
It's somewhat of an automatic renewal every year.
Well, what I'm asking is, I know a situation that came up where someone was issued a B when B was defined differently, but now it's not the same definition. That was under the old laws, and I believe Mr. Schlemmer might be one of them. How does that roll over? How does that change? How does all this affect something that was formally issued with a label of A or A1 or A2 or B? How does that change? It's not examined every year.
We didn't change anything except the ones that affect the video gaming. All the rest are as is. So the only people that this licensing will affect are people that are video gaming establishments licensed by the state, in which they will be transitioned into either an A1 or A2, depending on which one they have. Basically, I think the way it would work is all of them that currently have A1s that are allowed to sell sealed in a sealed container to go would then those are, I can't remember if that's A1 or A2 right now. It's
A1's
both.
consumption.
All of them are A1. I'm sorry. All of them that have A1s or A2s right now would then have A2s. All of them that have Bs right now would have A1s. Sorry.
And
Got that
how is that conveyed? How does that? I'm just.
It's not going to change
implemented.
anything
How
for
is it
them.
Implemented then.
It's not going to
The
change.
license is renewed.
It will
every
give
year?
them the exact same responsibilities regarding the sale of liquor that they have today. It's not
The way
changing
it
a
will be
darn thing.
implemented is those that have gaming license will just look at their
Yep.
application, and if it needs to be adjusted, it'll be adjusted. It won't change their operation one iota.
It's an internal thing.
Yes, exactly. It's mostly an internal thing.
Okay, so they'll be understanding this. The owners will be understanding this.
Nothing to understand for them.
It
Except
doesn't-
it takes out the-
change how they operate.
Doesn't change anything for them.
Yeah, it just changes the,
It's our,
the,
just
yeah,
our,
it changes the
totally
title.
our labeling.
It changes the title of the description, but it doesn't change what they're doing.
It's strictly an administrative change for us internal.
Yeah. The only thing this is doing, for those who are already operating a video gaming establishment, is removing that artificial 50% cap on their revenue that we had before.
And we discussed
Otherwise,
that.
this is not going to change business for them, the way they operate one bit, as written.
I just don't
Correct.
want to confuse
Yeah.
anybody in
Yep.
the future. If this is not going to be easy, an easy transition, I just don't want to
It'll
cause
be,
any more
they won't even,
misunderstandings.
yeah, they shouldn't
Tran-
even realize there is a transition, but if they do see a different letter on their liquor license or, on the paperwork and they want to come up and talk about it, great, but it's not going to change what they're doing and how they're doing it.
Their operations,
Yeah.
basically.
Correct.
Okay.
This discussion will be more of a hurdle to clear than it will be on that
Well, I
end.
just
Yeah.
don't want-
Trying to
Oh, no,
explain it.
that
No, I'm
makes
just saying,
perfect
trying to
sense.
explain it correctly is,
Yeah.
it's more effort than it's going to be, have any
Yeah,
impact
once-
on them at
once
all.
it's
Probably-
done.
It probably
Alderman
cleans up
Ressler?
what it goes-
Scott, to me, it would seem logical that, just to me, that most of everybody would go for the 82 if you plan on selling a six-pack to somebody to go.
That's dependent on what they're licensed through by the state. These classes correspond with how they're legally allowed to sell liquor through the state. We don't determine that.
We're the first licensed issue, and then they go to the state for their actual other license.
Yeah,
If
they're,
they're gonna go ahead and plan on selling, or be able to go ahead and sell a little package of liquor in addition to non-consumption on premise.
they've always been able to, and they haven't yet. I don't know why they would change. They've always been able to do that and they never have.
I think it was the cost of the license, but, all righty. Any other questions, comments? So Doug, you'll write this up for the next meeting?
If we're ready to move forward,
Scott.
you'll have an
Looking at
ordinance
Scott
and
I'm talking to Doug. So Scott, you're gonna have this.
Figure it out. Absolutely.
if we're moving forward, you'll have an ordinance at the next meeting. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Doug, you're on the refuse collection contract.
The current agreement with Reliable Sanitation is set to expire November 30th of this year. Tim Scheibe of Reliable has proposed a successor agreement consisting of a 5-year term, the elimination of the 60-cent per month recycling surcharge, a further reduction of our rate from $14.39 a month to $14.29 a month for that first year, and then an annual rate adjustment based off of the change in the consumer price index, or 3%, whichever is greater. I really feel that this would be advantageous for the city to proceed with. Several of the other municipalities that I spoke to, their rates are significantly higher than what we are currently experiencing here in Columbia. So I think it would be staff's recommendation that we would proceed at the next meeting with the renewal.
Anybody have any questions, concerns? All righty.
That's all I have.
And then for closed session, we have under 5 ILCS 20/2C5 and 11, purchase or lease of real property for the use of a public body and pending or probable litigation. If somebody be so inclined to make that motion to go into executive session by Alderman Martins, second by Alderman Riddle
Holtkamp.
or Holdcamp. I think he was speaking before you raised your hand.
God bless you.
It takes a while to get there.
Roll call.
Eversol.
Yes.
Agni. Nemeth.
Yes.
Ressler.
Yes.